Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video I'm going to look into the function of friction dampers, also known as shock absorbers, and I will demonstrate how to repair worn out friction dampers on Miele front loader washing machines. Now before you start dismantling your machine, just make sure it stands firmly on all 4 feet. If it wobbles like this or even slightly, then you want to adjust one of the front feet and make sure that the machine is balanced. Don't forget to counter the nut. That might already solve your problem. Good friction dampers usually last for the lifetime of the average appliance. Unfortunately, these dampers cannot reach the service life of Miele machines. Therefore, all the machines that are otherwise in perfect condition often show symptoms of worn out shock absorbers, which are: the machine fails to spin dry, the drum bounces easily, excessive drum movement at the beginning and at the end of the spin cycle, loud internal banging, scratches around the door glass, or shattered door glass. So what exactly is the function of friction dampers? The answer may be obvious, but there's more to it. Here's how it works. The drum or suds container is suspended in the machine's frame. 4 springs hook into the eyeballs on top of the drum and transfer the weight onto the frame. Friction dampers connect the drum to the bottom of the frame, and there are heavy weights bolted to the front and to the back of the drum. Let's say the red circle is an imbalance of the load. When the drum rotates slowly, the load follows the drum movement until it reaches the point when gravity pulls it back down. At slightly higher speed, the centrifugal force starts to pull the imbalanced load outwards and causes the drum to move. When the drum rotates above 40 RPM, the centrifugal force Fc exceeds the gravitational pull and the load begins to cling to the inside of the drum. As the spin speed increases, the centrifugal force can lift the drum, including the heavy weights. As an example, an imbalance of 1 kilo that rotates at 1000 RPM generates a centrifugal force of 2700 kilonewton or 280 kilograms. The inertia of the weights counteracts the centrifugal force and reduces the drum movement to short but fast movements. This works very well at high spin speed, but is not very effective at slow speed. This is when friction dampers come into action. Good friction dampers effectively reduce the slower but longer drum movements at the beginning and at the end of the spin cycle at speeds of about 40 to 100 RPM. A friction damper basically works like a brake that transfers mechanical energy into heat and slows down rapid movements. The construction is very simple. A plastic or metal cylinder interacts with a piston that is bolted to the machine's frame. The cylinder is bolted to the suds container and follows the movement of the drum. A friction material sits in the piston recess, and a thin film of grease on the inside of the cylinder has a decelerating effect through its high viscosity and also reduces wear of the friction material. As shown here, the mechanical energy is partially absorbed and the travel distance reduced. Friction material is made of a flexible foam rubber strip that deforms as shown here. Over time, this material becomes less flexible, wears out, and the friction damper becomes ineffective. To rectify this, we can either repair a worn-out friction damper or replace the whole damper. So enough of the theory now, let's get our hands dirty. Before I do anything, I make sure the appliance is unplugged. This is the most important step because it's easy to forget and the consequences of that can be devastating. So in order to get access to the shock absorbers, I quickly remove the outer panels. And here we are. Now, as you can see, these dampers, they've gone past their lifetime. In domestic Miele machines, we'll most likely find an RD12 or an RD18 type damper. So we will need a 13mm spanner to get the bolts out. With the RD18 type damper, we only really need to take the cylinder off. The RD12 damper needs a bit more work, so the whole damper needs to come out. Well, that's pretty much what I expected. So before we do anything else, I'm going to check the rubber bushes on the shock absorbers on both sides and make sure that they are still okay. Now, in order to remove that piston from the cylinder, I need to cut off this little crimped in ring. And here we go. I'm using an electric saw and cut that just very closely to the end of that ring. And I've got to be careful that I don't cut into the plastic piston. Now I'm using a blunt tool to open up the end of that cylinder so that I can withdraw the piston. Then I'm going to have a look at the friction material here. So that's pretty much at it. It's all brittle, it comes off in pieces, and the grease is all old and not functional anymore. So I'm pinching off that leftover ring, clean up the grease. I need to get that grease out of all the crevices here, and I'm using some white spirit on the rag and clean it nicely. In particular, a little recess here. I'm going to clean the cylinder as well with a rag and a screwdriver, and that does the trick. The original shock absorbers have only one friction strip in this little recess, but I will use two to get the right dampening effect. And later on, I'm going to fill this little groove with rubber grease. To replace the friction material, I use a 4mm thick foam tape. I'm going to measure it up, and it needs to be exactly 70 by 13 millimeters. So I'm going to double that little strip here and make sure it fits in the recess. And they need to be butt jointed so they cannot overlap. Next, I'm going to use some red rubber grease on an old toothbrush and apply a little bit of that on the cylinder where the piston enters. So the first strip of friction material goes in. I fill the little groove with rubber grease. And while I push the second strip in, I'll make sure that the end of the strips don't overlap, because that can happen quite easily, and then they come off the piston. So that looks like a proper friction damper again. So I'll tap in the ends so that during the install the piston doesn't come out inadvertently. And here we go. So there's a proper dampening effect again. Now I'm going to reinstall the damper. That's not really much of a challenge. The bolts go back in, doesn't really matter which way around they go. Don't forget to tighten them properly. So and here we go. Now the other two shock absorbers are a little bit different. I make sure that the rubber bushings are okay before I recondition these. So they go into my vise. And now these shock absorbers have a little cage that holds that friction material, and there's a little clip here, and there's one on each side, and they need to be pushed in simultaneously to remove the cage that holds that friction material in place. So I'm using the two screwdrivers, push them in, those clips, and here comes the cage. See, the friction material here is once again worn out, it's brittle, and has become ineffective. I replaced the friction material with a new rubber strip of 70 by 13 by 5 millimeter. It's a foam rubber, and it needs to be once again butt jointed. So I've got to make sure that the butt joint is done properly. So I'm using my screwdriver and make sure that the butt joint does not overlap. So, and that looks pretty good to me. Now a bit of rubber grease goes on the inside of the friction material before I push the cage back into the cylinder. So that should clip in now, and I'll make sure that it's in properly. So and here we go. So plenty of rubber grease around the piston, and then I push the cylinder with a new friction material over the piston, and here's a proper dampening effect again. So that cylinder gets bolted onto the drum support, and that same thing happens on the other side. Make sure that it's all tightened up properly. and now that looks pretty good. There's a proper dampening effect now, and that will last for the next 100 years. So before I do a test run, I make sure that the machine doesn't wobble and stands firmly on all 4 feet. So here we go. Thanks for watching. If my video helped you fix your Miele appliance or you've learned something new, then please subscribe to my channel or leave a nice comment.